This unexpected election campaign has thrown one bold idea to the forefront of the nation's mind. The Tories pledged to reintroduce a form of national service. However, since the announcement, there has been much confusion over what this actually means. National service traditionally meant, according to the National Army Museum, a standardised form of peacetime conscription, which was introduced in 1947 for all able-bodied men between the ages of 18 and 21. The young men would then spend 4 years on a reserve list until this Attlee-era policy was phased out by the Conservatives in 1963. Well, today's Tory Prime Minister wants to bring it, or something like it, back. He posted a video on TikTok clarifying the terms of the policy. Let's take a listen.
No, I'm not sending everyone off to join the army. What I am doing is proposing a bold new model of national service for 18-year-olds. They'll be able to choose to spend 12 months in a full-time military commission or 1 weekend per month volunteering in roles within your local community.
Well, that's our new TikToking Prime Minister. Well, just hours after the policy announcement was made, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, said, "There's going to be no criminal sanction. There's going to be no one going to jail over this." So national service without necessarily joining the armed forces, mandatory volunteering, which some might describe as a contradiction in terms, and no criminal penalty for refusing to do so. However, this policy might not be hastily or as hastily thrown together as some might think. Yes, the Theresa Mayite think tank Onward wrote a report last year promoting what they called Great British National Service. It just so happens that the former director of that think tank, Onward, now works as Rishi Sunak's head of policy. Perhaps, with the recent climate, it would be beneficial to the nation to instil some national pride into the younger generations. But is this new top-down statist policy just wishful thinking on the part of Rishi Sunak? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by my panel, the former Labour MP and former member of the Royal Navy, Stephen Pound, and the former Brexit Party-turned-Conservative MEP, Annunziata Rees-Mogg. Also joining us is TikTok influencer Matthew Matos Gillingwater, who has racked up millions of views, tens of millions of views, lampooning the idea of military conscription for Generation Z. Let's take a look.
To this, I got ready for the battlefield. I didn't get to finish my bronzer though because I literally started getting shot at. Like, what? This is what I was wearing for the day. I can't believe they gave us these cargos for free because they are so cute. Luckily, the French are on our side this time, so I had to get some of the French girlies to do my French tips, and they look amazing. But anyways, we headed down to the battlefield, and me and my bestie found this swing. We had so much fun. I had to take some Instagram pictures.
Generation Z in the army. Well, would it actually play like that? Let's turn to Matthew first. Thank you for joining us here on State of the Nation. What made you make the videos?
Well, I felt like it was just such a ridiculous thing, sending Gen Z out to war. I just thought it would be a funny idea to show what it would actually be like. Also kind of playing on how old people would view Gen Z in the war. So I just thought I'd kind of make fun of the whole thing. Because
this has gone really viral on social media. People aged 18 to 24 all thinking, hang on, am I going to be conscripted? Do you think this is working in favour of the Conservatives or against them?
Well, I think they've kind of given up on the younger generation. I don't think, anyone my age, I don't really know anyone that's going to vote for them. So I think it's kind of a desperate attempt to get the older people who maybe think of us as, we're too woke, we're too lazy, this and that, to, get their support instead of ours, because I think they're basically done with the younger generation now.
Well, Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, and of course, Generation Z, I would assume yourself as well?
General ZZZ.
Very good. Do you think that this is just a sort of age-dividing culture war from the Tories?
Well, there's a couple of things really worry me about this stuff. 2 days before the announcement was made, Andrew Morrison, who's a very good defence minister, actually on the floor of the House said, we have no plans whatsoever to introduce national service. This would be destructive of morale and it simply wouldn't work. That was in a reply to Mark Pritchard, another Tory MP.
In fairness, that was about...
It was 2 days. 2 days is a long time in politics.
In fairness, that was about putting every single young person to the army. This proposal from Rishi Sunak would put about 5% of young people in the army.
Here's the problem, and you've actually highlighted it yourself. If it's not compulsory, what is the sanction? Are we actually seriously talking about people being fined or imprisoned? You haven't got any flipping room in the prisons anyway. But here's the real problem. If you've got a group of people in the army, either they will be in a platoon or a battalion of their own, in which case, what is their job, what are they supposed to do, or they'll be integrated into the existing standing forces, in which case it will be utterly destructive of morale. The point is that the modern armed forces are incredibly technical, and it's interesting that they talked about involvement in drones and cyber warfare.
But they've addressed that. They have
Sorry,
said...
Sergeant Rees-Mogg here. Let's have a word.
No.
Sorry, Captain.
The actual figures you've quoted, it's about 5%.
Yeah.
It's actually 1 in 28.
Yeah. So why only 1 in 28 if it's such a good idea?
Because the rest of it is to make you volunteer within your own community.
But this was David Cameron's idea, didn't it, 15 years ago? Don't you remember?
There was
a voluntary scheme, but Annunziata,
Yeah.
there are lots of conservatives who say, actually, we had conscription in this country. The Tories got rid of it. Attlee brought it in. He was a socialist. This is about the state telling people what to do. It's not very conservative.
My father was a conscript. He had to leave university to go and be conscripted. And I think he would, if he were not dead, happily say right now that that was not a good idea. He was hopeless in terms of the army.
But a brilliant newspaper editor.
He had the
But his legacy does live on,
of
though.
the rest of his family. Being a fighter wasn't his style. You can use people, I think we're more advanced now, in different ways. You can use their brains, you can use their skills, you can use TikTok, you can use any kind of electronic stuff that I will not begin to understand.
But one of the questions I'd ask...
And that would be a good idea, but bringing people together, surely, is always
you just to bring Matthew back in for a second. Matthew, do you think that your generation generally is a bit too glued to social media, doesn't get stuck in with the community? Because a lot of this isn't just about the army, it's also about volunteering and sort of picking up litter and all the rest of it. Is there something of a community spirit that needs to be injected?
Of course, I understand that side of it, but I also think the older generations who want us to do this, they never had to do that. They never had to do community service. They never had to join the military, so I don't know why it's just our generation now suddenly.
And Annunziata, there will be many young people who think, hang on, I've done my national service, I've done 2 years doing my national service, staying indoors during COVID so that Granny didn't die.
No, that's absolutely fair. But actually, if you're double Matthew's age, as I am, you had to do at school a compulsory community service. You had to go and visit old people. You had to work in a nursery. You had to do things that brought people together of different generations. And unfortunately, I would say the woke propaganda has stopped that happening.
No, they'd want to be fighting from home, wouldn't they?
Now, they need to have DBS checks on both sides, and it's made it impossible because schools can't
Tom, can I just say one very serious thing? When we had national servicemen and women, men they were obviously, had a choice between 18 months and 2 years. 18 months was active service. Our national servicemen died in Korea, in Malaya. They were actually fighting. It wasn't just about picking up litter. It was going and being killed. So is the national service actually about a volunteer army which would actually fill the gaps in our armed forces, which are calamitous like a chasm at the present time? Is it about community service? Is it about throwing some red meat to the Tory right because they've given up on Matthew's generation and they're trying to give something to people of my generation? Well, people of my generation actually can see through this nonsense. This is a desperate last throw. And I just wonder what on earth they're going to bring up next. God help us if they start talking about capital punishment or something. There seems to be no depth to which they will not sink.
And yet, there was polling done by Onward, the think tank I mentioned in the introduction. Of course, a think tank that was born out of the 2017 Conservative manifesto and those behind it. Now, many of the people from that think tank work for Rishi Sunak, work in Number 10. They did polling on this that showed almost every age group supports this, apart from Generation Z.
I'm sorry, focus groups are the way, that's the past. I mean, focus groups are not good indicators of really where people are standing. Matthew is a person, he actually is speaking from the ground up on this one. He knows what he's talking about. You honestly can't tell me that people of Matthew's generation are going to overwhelmingly say, absolutely, I want to go in scratchy khaki uniform and, so live on a diet of worms, whatever it is they eat on Salisbury Plain and, all those dreadful things, be hazing and everything. No, I'm sorry. The armed forces themselves don't want it. I've spoken to a lot about Navy friends of mine. The last thing we want is on a Royal Navy ship, which is an incredibly difficult, expensive, technical piece of kit. The last thing you want is some unwilling person forced in there to mess around, with your 30mm.
But should we not encourage us all being part of our community. Taking part
but
in
not
the
this way.
broader
But do
part of
it through
society.
scouts, do it through cadets, do it through all the organisations that exist. You don't need this.
Only 1 in 28 would be forced into the military.
Well, in that case, what is the point?
Let's
Join the scouts.
Okay, well, let's
community
turn to
service.
Matthew for a final word, because a lot of this election is being fought on social media. Are the Tories or the Labour Party doing more to sort of engage? Because we saw the Prime Minister post on TikTok advertising this policy. Did it go down well?
Yeah, I've also seen Labour post a TikTok kind of taking the mick out of the whole thing. But to me, I just feel like the younger generation is completely disillusioned by the Tory party. It feels like they almost don't like us. So yeah, I don't really think they've got much chance of winning over the younger generation, especially with this kind of thing. Nobody my age wants to join the military. We just turned to the age where we can go partying and we want to live our lives, be young, just like you guys did when you were that age. So why our generation, why is that being stripped from us on our weekends?
Do you support votes at 16, incidentally?
No.
Now that is interesting.
No, I think even
because I don't.
I'm
Labour and I don't.
And I'm Tory
Just very
either.
quickly, because we do need to get to an ad break, but why do you think 16-year-olds wouldn't support that idea?
I know what I was like when I was 16. I know what all my friends were like when they were 16. Nobody, very small amount of people cared about politics. I feel like people will just end up doing what their parents did and will just be influenced by them. So I don't really think it's much
Interesting stuff. Well, on that note, thank you to Matthew and to my panel.